Greetings, my peeps. I am John the Verbose, and this video is my YouTube Pagan Challenge video for week 34 on what is your favorite place to visit. So, this is the video of the great pagan pilgrimage sites, or at least from my perspective as a Reformed Druid. And I should say, because I left this out in my last video, that although I'm a Druid, I do not speak on behalf of all Druids, nor do I speak on behalf of the Reformed Druids of North America. The views, opinions, and thoughts I express are my own. Well, this place is quickly becoming one of my favorite places to visit. I did learn that this park does indeed have a name, because I mentioned in several videos back that this is an unlabeled park along Minnehaha Creek, but I've discovered that its name is Big Willow Park, which is connected via hiking trails to what I thought was the Big Willow Park, exclusively, which is like a quarter of a mile down the road. And so it is connected to this place by trail, and therefore it is part of it. Well, that makes sense. But that's the only part that's labeled on the map. It's like this part's just this green outline space in the maps. And Minnehaha Creek flows through it from Lake Minnetonka to its outflow below Minnehaha Falls and goes into the Mississippi River. And this region is steeped in so much unwritten history, and it is one of the ancient lands that belonged to the Dakota tribes in the area. And I'm glad places like this are preserved, because living in an urban environment, over my lifetime I have seen so much natural area being lost to development. It's happening across the street. They're building massive condos. Hello.
Hello.
And so I'm so glad that places like this are preserved for everyone to enjoy. Hello. There are so many places that I go around Minnesota where I live that when I grew up, they're just wild and probably untouched since settlers were here. Some of them had been previously cultivated but then reclaimed as natural area. But there's one problem, is that land that's not being used for commercial purposes, like this free to enter municipal park, is considered by so many to be tax delinquent land because it's not earning any revenue. And I can understand the importance of that, but at the same time that is so tacky, especially from my experience as a Druid. It's like there's the whole Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness in northern Minnesota, and to some that's considered tax delinquent land. They want to develop it. They want to take advantage of the natural resources. They want to exploit the land. And I see that happening all over where I live, that the land that I grew up being wild is now developed and exploited. And there are houses sprawling across it. And there are so many other places that I go by now that are wild, and I go to visit them, and it's a wonderful thing. But then I realize that given another 10, 15, or 20 years, there is a very good chance that it will be exploited, and what we know now as a wild space will be destroyed and developed. That seems to be the inevitable pattern, though I'm not saying that's going to happen to everywhere, and I'm sure that there are places that will be reclaimed and cleaned up and turned into this big landscape garden, and that's nice too, because at least it's man-made or man-engineered nature at the very least. That's a decent compromise for now, I guess. But mentioning northern Minnesota, I love going up to the north shore of Lake Superior going to Duluth and that vicinity. I went to college at the College of St. Scholastica, which most people haven't heard of, but if they've heard of the University of Minnesota Duluth, if they go up the hill 4 more blocks, there's a giant castle, and that's the College of St. Scholastica. And when I was there were about 100 acres of wild land adjacent to them, and it was called the Valley of Silence, and it was named by the class of 1922, that they could go into the Valley of Silence and be away from the noise of the city. And by the time I was there, you can go into the Valley of Silence, and it's this wonderful natural area, but the noise of the city has arrived there. And so it wasn't always that silent. But even in my own 4 years at St. Scholastica, I saw the back acreage being lost to development. And there was one of my favorite areas to go back there that I called the Dark Woods. There was a natural spring flowing through this rocky area, and in that area the soil and the conditions were perfect for pine trees to dominate, and cedars and junipers. Those trees with the dense foliage made it darker than the rest of the deciduous trees in most of the Valley of Silence. There's a leaf that is swirling as it is drifting by. Having fun? But in these dark woods of the Valley of Silence, there isn't much sunlight that gets through the pines and the cedars and the junipers as much as they do through the deciduous overgrowth. And so that was a place that really nobody ever went except me and maybe my friends, because we picked a place to have a fire pit in the woods, and arranged some stones to carefully keep the fire enclosed, and so we'd go out there and just it was a very tame party. There was only one time that we were out there drinking, but we were usually out there having fun and being responsible at the same time. If only more people could be like that, right? And then there was the day that I went out on a stroll just by myself, went to the dark woods, and there was this bright light up ahead, and as I made it through into this clearing that wasn't there before, it was just clear cut, no trees, just the rocky forest floor, dirt, stumps, roots. At the time it was only about 2 acres, but each time I went out there it was getting bigger and bigger. It had cut so deep into the dark woods. Even then, it's like just the knowledge that the developers had cut into it, and then they're building these huge $300,000, $400,000 houses in it. That really cut deep into me as well. And so I was looking at some of the maps in the area, and I learned that the college really only owned a fraction of that area. And so they could cut the Valley of Silence in half, where like one side was owned by the city, a portion was owned by the state. The college only owned like the northern edge of the valley, and I thought the bottom of the valley has some of the most interesting sites to visit in it. Though, speaking of college-owned lands, I also really enjoy, and this should be obvious, going to the Carleton College Arboretum. And that's a lot closer than me going to Duluth. It's only 45 minutes as opposed to 2.5 hours. And the Arboretum there is actually getting bigger because the college, my understanding is that the college was leasing land to farmers over the years. And in some areas they stopped leasing the land, and in other areas I think they keep buying up land, and that's where they're restoring native prairie. They're planting oak savannas and preserving the oaks that are there. They're removing invasive species. Aside from the ecological aspects of the Arboretum, there are also the sacred sites to the Reformed Druids. Carleton College being the birthplace of, I would say, the birthplace of American Druidry. Now, some will argue that AODA, the Ancient Order of Druids in America, predated the Reformed Druids by like 50 years or more. That's arguable. Though, hello little crane fly. Though the Ancient Order of Druids in North America only had that name since the 1970s, I think 77 maybe. Before that, they were the Ancient Order of Masonic Druids in America. And that's a mouthful. So AOMDA, the Ancient Order of Masonic Druids in America, was much more Masonic than what we would consider Druidic at the time. So, as regarding Neo-Druidry, the Reformed Druid movement was where the birthplace of Neo-Druidry was in America. And I would have to add that they are older than Obad by 1 year. So and so there are so many sacred sites in the Carleton Arboretum that were important to the Reformed Druids. And I think it's worthy of any modern Druid as a pilgrimage site to go to Monument Hill, where the first services were held, where the first all-night vigil was held. And then to, of course, go to the Hill of Three Oaks, where they later moved their services to, and see the massive altar stone, which is a natural glacial erratic of a granite boulder with the inscribed Druid sigil on it. And 3 oak trees, of course. Technically it's 4 oak trees because 2 of them are like forked at the base, and they did a test on it and they found that they are indeed 2 separate trees, but it is labeled as the Hill of Three Oaks. And that was actually the name given to it by the Reformed Druids, and now it's the official name on the campus for the campus. There's also the Druid's Den, which is a nice secluded fire pit site, and there is the New Stone Circle in the Arboretum, which in the years of their legitimacy, when they were an official student organization, they asked if they could build a stone circle, and so the chapel was like, okay, because since it's a religious student organization, they get their budget through the chapel, and I think that the year that they built that, they blew the whole budget on the stone circle, which I think is worth it. It's a beautiful stone circle, and I believe the stones, 4 of the stones from the circle were incorporated from a previous stone circle. But there's so many more places that are special to me that I like to visit, that are that have a spiritual significance, and I don't want to mention them all for the sake of time, and there'll probably be like 1 or 2 that I didn't mention here that by the time I'm done editing this video, I would have been like, oh, I should have mentioned this, like the Jeffers petroglyphs in Jeffers, Minnesota. I want to go back there again soon. It's an amazing site with a ton of petroglyphs just carved into the Sioux quartzite. It is heartwarming to know that the lands that I walk on do have some sort of ancestral connection that spans thousands of years. So I will leave you with that, and I want to thank you for watching my video, and we will see you next week. So thank you. Boom, I'm back. I did forget to mention something that's very significant. My grove's name in the Reformed Druids of North America is Oakdale Grove. And I forgot to mention one of the significant sites is Oakdale Nature Preserve, because that was one of the sites that I was going to that I took the name from for Oakdale Grove. At the time I lived in Oakdale, and so when I started my Proto Grove, I was like, well, I could reboot the Twin Cities Grove, which was the one that Isaac Bonowitz had, but it wasn't really Reformed Druids of North America. That grove was the Schismatic Druids of North America. Isaac was rather frustrated with his apparent inability to control the Reformed Druids of North America and make changes to make it more Neo-Pagan. So that's why he formed the Schismatic Druids of North America. And so the Twin Cities Grove was long inactive. And so I thought, well, let's let lying dogs lie. So I created Oakdale Proto Grove. That was based in Oakdale Nature Preserve. Oh, look. Development encroaching. And that's where I found my circular grove of oak trees that was around this ancient oak tree, and it had a granite boulder at one of the stones. It was the perfect site for me to be starting a proto-grove. I don't get to go out there that often because it's on the opposite side of the city from me now, but it is what it is. I get out there when I can. So thank you for watching. See you next week.